Join us as we make known the unknown. The world is listening.
And it's in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to KRSE Beyond the Ordinary Webcast Radio with a fascinating hour to be sure with your hosts, Nancy and Elena.
And your beloved guest, George.
Yeah, that's me.
That's you. Hey, there was a start to this.
Oh, the Morse code thing. Ladies and gentlemen, before you joined our preceding program in progress, two young women and an old geezer on a goat ranch were discussing which is faster, Morse code or texting on a typical cell phone. The answer was actually derived from Jay Leno's program a number of years back. He got a couple of just plain old off-the-street good ham radio operators who could send and receive Morse code at about 25 words a minute, which ain't no big shakes once you get used to the stuff. Which is right, question mark, in Morse code. The thing that Leno discovered was even if they take world-class texting champions, they can't keep up with a couple of geezers and a Morse code key, which I think is incredibly cool because both Nancy and Elena are ham radio interested people. Can't get them to put up an antenna so we can chat without using their phone company. I, on the other hand, have managed to place a substantial aluminum overcast 60 feet over the office here. But anyway, so that's I guess our first item. When the stuff hits the fan, there ain't nothing like ham radio to get through.
That's, oh gosh,
or an ICBM. I mean, depending on the mission.
We're making slow progress in getting all the gear together and being ready. We'll get there.
Yeah.
It was all dismantled when we left California, and we need parts, so we're kind of waiting for parts to materialize.
Yeah, well, I know you're into, positive mental thinking and stuff, but it also helps to have a PayPal account and just get online and order the stuff.
Uh-huh.
I tell you this firsthand because I've been working on materializing $1 million in small bills, and I've got a nice big area cleared out in my office. But the only thing that's come by is the cat and a couple of spiders. so I'm thinking to myself, there's got to be something to this visualization I'm missing. And actually, it turns out there is. I wrote a couple of columns recently on this group up in, I want to say Saskatchewan, a group of Jewish scholars or people who have studied Hebrew, let's put it that way. Yes, they're Jewish. Yes, they have studied Hebrew, but I'm not sure they'd be recognized as scholars officially because they have developed this thing called self-defining Hebrew. And basically what they've done is they've gone back to the oldest Hebrew language copies of Genesis they can find, and they're redoing it, not using Strong's Concordance, which was written in about 1895, because they got looking at it and said, this is crazy. The same word can be, depending on which word you're looking at in Strong's, may have up to 90 different meanings, and it's all contextual. And they said, this isn't how the infallible language of the universe would be handed down to people, right? Well, they figured out this self-defining thing, and as it turns out, if you go to, www.thechronicleproject.org, what it turns out is that in this reinterpretation of Genesis, using a coherent language with single definitions instead of, chapters of definitions, turns out it's the story of Earth being terraformed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's pretty interesting. I mean, and the ones doing the terraforming, we refer to them in a lot of religiosity as angels and stuff, but the term in self-defining Hebrew turned out to be malak, M-A-L-A-K, which is kind of like contract workers doing the job of terraforming this place on behalf of the ruler of all, who we're not really sure what that is, but it's a very interesting tale. And it just you know, as somebody who was brought up in a Protestant faith, it was very interesting and mind expanding to go back and say, the organizational hands have been all over this document, and come to find out that there are way different tales to be read if you go back and retranslate. Anyway, to me it was interesting.
It is. It's all very interesting. We have a true scholar as a guest, Jaime Leal Anaya, and he is so knowledgeable in ancient texts, writings of symbology, everything used. He did a series here for us that is just awesome.
Is that in the archives? Can I go hear that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I'll have to dig those out, because we're coming up to a very interesting period of history when, well, first of all, the new halfpasthuman.com report called The Shape of Things to Come, which is my buddy Cliff High's predictive linguistics project, which I've been around the fringes of for almost 10 years now. It predicts the future based on changing use of language on the internet. And the interesting thing about it is that we're pretty firmly set for release language to begin. We've been in this building tension period now for a number of months, I want to say since March or so. And now we're about to head across a summer of multiple release periods, but what's really scary is we've got something that is several orders of magnitude, which is times either 10 or 100, depending on which magnitudalist you're talking to, bigger than 911. And when I say bigger than 911, in Cliff's model space, the impact of 911 was spread out over about 3 hours, roughly 2 to 3 hours, which is that point on that, what day of the week was it, Monday or Tuesday, whatever 9/11 was, when everybody had their eyes glued to the TV sets during the event. And whatever it is that's going to happen around November 8th through about the 12th will be of the same intensity of 9/11. But instead of being a 2-hour event that then goes into ripples and echoes and so forth on the back side, we'll be looking at closer to 96 hours of that. And whatever it is apparently starts in the U.S. and then ripples all over the entire planet.
Well, that sounds like the oil spill, George.
No, actually, no, it does and it doesn't. This is in Cliff's model space. We're looking at temporal markers. For example, back in the March 22nd Shape of Things to Come report, he laid out some very clear language that the blowing up of the Middle East with regard to Iran and so forth would get underway shortly after the general with the malmots or bad words. And we just saw that yesterday with President Obama firing basically General Stanley McChrystal and elevating General Petraeus, well, de-elevating because Petraeus was sort of risked specifically with getting Afghanistan going. The problem with all of this stuff is how long will the United States be able to afford to maintain effectively military governance all of Rome in some of these countries. Now, I'll admit, no question, Iraq is very critical to the financial interests of the United States, especially now that we're playing musical drilling moratoriums down in the Gulf, one day the Obama administration says, oh, can't do any more drilling. A couple of weeks go by, and the Obama administration meets Big Oil head on, and Big Oil goes, well, you can't do that because we got these here contracts. And then the Obama administration says, no, we're going to appeal the courts siding with the big oil companies. And just today, the judge in that case refused a stay, which would have continued the moratorium. So we're looking really at a global balance of shift of oil power, and it's against that background and what's going on with, there are lots of reports, including the very well-connected Middle East news stores, Debka, DEBKA.com, which is reporting the Israelis are massing troops and equipment and so forth for an airstrike up in Azerbaijan, which is on the far side over toward the Caspian, up the hill, if you will, from Iran. Now, earlier it had been thought back in 2009, or even earlier, mid-2009, maybe even as early as 2008, that the Israelis would be able to launch their attack on the Iranian enrichment facilities by using airfields in part of Georgia, which were adjacent to South Ossetia and so forth. That, of course, blew up because the Russians sent forces into South Ossetia to look after their interests, and so it became questionable whether that would be a workable plan. And then you've seen over the last 3 or 4 months a very rapid deterioration of Israeli relationship with Turkey. Now, in order to get up to that western side to attack Iran, they would have to, the Israelis would have to overfly Turkish airspace. That's off the table now because of deteriorating relations, especially over the Gaza aid ships. So now what happens is about a week ago, the Saudis gave a green light to Israel for overflights of Saudi airspace, which it can be argued gives them a way to fly men, equipment, aircraft up to Azerbaijan, which could then be used as a base for the attacks on Iran this summer. And where this gets really curious is we can read the linguistics at this point a couple of different ways. One way to read it is that the Iran attack or attacks will lead to a series of Arab skirmishes over the course of the summer, and then there's some language in the linguistics suggesting that for Israeli cities